I need you frightened.
Welcome to the Chaos, episode 1.
Episode 1.
This is Reflections of Horror. I'm Lisa.
I'm Cale, and thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is the intro one.
It
to
is.
kind of go off script and lose our minds.
Yeah, there really is no script. I wonder if there'll be a script in the future, but you know what? It's fine if it's not.
No,
Yeah, I also doubt it. It's fine though. But yeah, episode 1. Figured we'd do a little bit of introductions about who's here, who's talking, and why you should listen to our opinions.
Yeah. How did we get here, Cale? Talk to the people.
Oh, well, so you were a regular at the store that we now both work at, and
which will remain nameless now.
For now, yeah.
But the internet sleuths could probably figure that out.
Exactly. So yeah, and then you started working there. There's a little bit more backstory to that, but you asked me, you're like, "Hey, do you want to be on a podcast?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think so." And then we started getting into more about what it would be, and it'll be a horror podcast. Talk about horror movies. I love giving my opinion. I love telling people what's good, and I also love being a hater. So yeah. I was totally on board from the very first second.
Yeah. I felt like that would be your rendition. I feel like I had much more of a motive with this.
Oh yes.
I've always wanted to do a podcast, like a podcast of my own, and I never wanted it to I was like, I could never just ramble by myself because that is just not me.
Well, it's like you don't have anyone to agree with you.
And I've always needed we can vibe. And I think we had enough post-shift drinks and hangouts and discussions that we just spiraled, and I was like, this is it. I was like,
the chosen one.
This is the podcast, buddy. And I was like, I'm just gonna shoot my shot, and you're like, oh, I'd be down for that. And
excellent. Yeah,
here we are.
I'm honored that I'm included because I think we make up the core of the spooky bitches where we work.
Yes.
And but yeah, so like you started as a regular at the store before you even started working there, and you special ordered a lot of particularly horror books, and I was like, this person has really good taste. This person's definitely queer, and I'm like, I want to be their friend so bad. And then you started working there, and I was like, oh my gosh, like Lisa's one of my new favorite people. So, here we are.
For those of us who are just listening and not viewing on YouTube, I am about 6'1", covered in tattoos, and just scream big old lesbian wherever I go. So easy to clock. Yeah, and I think part of getting this job at the cafe bookstore and the long backstory, but just coming out of a career of sports, like I just spoke to our owner and I was like, look, let's not do the sports route. Like just tell people I'm into horror. Like that's the route I went.
Yes.
And the same thing, I mean, you are our book wizard, which we will get into that. I'm going to do a movie spin on this. She might have some book recommendations for everyone down the road.
I will definitely have book recommendations.
And I was like, yeah, just tell people I'm into horror. And like, I knew you were a spooky bitch because we had discussed it. Because any book I buy is really a horror book.
Yeah.
So every time I did that, you were like, oh my God, this looks so good. Like, have you read it? And I'd be like, yeah, it's horror. Da, da, da. You'd be like, oh, that sounds great. Like, it's on my to-read list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, usually. My for reference, my TBR is, I think at this point, 333 books long. So, you know, every book is on my TBR, but you always pick the good ones. So, like, the ones that were, like, close to the top.
And then I met more people, and I was like, well, everybody's a spooky bitch.
Oh my gosh, yeah. No, our chef's a spooky bitch. Stage is a little spooky. We just got all the spookies. And I think you'll find that in a lot of bookstores. It's really funny.
Fun, witchy, spooky vibe.
It is, yeah. So how did we get here? Not even into this situation, but how did you decide to start this, and how did you get into horror?
So I am much like my sexuality, you could say I'm a late bloomer. Didn't figure out I was a big old homo till college, and really did not dive full go into horror until like COVID. So like really.
That's so interesting.
I know, and like I'm I like to think I've always been a little bit of a spooky bitch because, like, I was born on Halloween.
Right.
So
I always
like,
forget that about you. Oh my god.
That's right there.
It's
born
right
on Halloween.
there.
I'm a Scorpio, so like we're spooky already. So Halloween was always really big for me. Trick or treating, dressing up, Halloween parties, like that was always the main attraction. As a kid, the only memories I have of horror movies are like not a good time and being terrified and hating them. I remember vividly being at a sleepover in the basement, middle school-ish. And the person that had the sleepover was a big horror movie person. Like I remember her and her mom, like that was their thing. And she put on The Ring. And I was the girl at the sleepover that was like, "Can we turn the lights on and turn this off?" And everybody was like, "No, you're ruining this." And I was like, "No, like I am terrified. I want to go home."
Oh my gosh.
So that was the first core memory. And then
did you go home? Did you stick it out?
I did stick it out, but I wasn't having a good time at that point.
You stuck it out, but you weren't happy about it.
And then again, similar age, like middle school probably, I was at a sleepover at just a friend's house, and we watched Jeepers Creepers.
A classic. That's such a good one.
Storming outside. Raining. Power goes out. And I'm like, oh, nah, like, I actually need to go the fuck home. Like, I need to go home. I just remember being of an age, every time I closed my eyes and I opened them, I saw the Jeepers Creepers figure in the corner, and I was like, nah, I'm not safe.
No.
Call my mom now. I'm not having a good time still.
Yeah, it's the truck for me and Jeepers Creepers. That one always gets me because I used to see a creepy truck just like that driving around our neighborhood, and I'm like, this is it.
So then the older I got, I think, like, I started to watch them a little bit, and then me and my older brother kind of bonded over horror.
Okay.
We had a very fun span of time where we were actually roomies post-college. So we would, like, watch horror because he really loves horror. But our running joke was, my premise was, it needed to be 90 minutes or less.
Okay.
It had to be American. Like, I'm not reading subtitles for a horror movie.
Okay, also fair.
And someone had to die brutally in the first 5 to 10 minutes for me to have any remote interest in it. And he made fun of me relentlessly for it, but that's just what it was.
Yeah.
And then COVID hit, so then everybody stuck inside. And I was like, well, I'm just going to, like, binge watch some horror stuff, whatever. And I dove into Eli Roth's History of Horror. So
excellent.
Eli Roth, problematic, obviously. Hate that he had played a part in educating me here.
Yeah.
When I could have just listened to my older brother, but we won't dive into that either. And every episode was a subgenre, and they dive into, like, the nuances of it.
Yeah.
No, it was just like a COVID enlightenment. I was like, oh, I see it now.
That was like your, like, look into, like, horror can be bigger than kind of just like the gore, the jump scares. Yeah. And
that's kind of what we're going to discuss on this podcast, is like covering some of these movies, but like, what are we actually talking about?
Yeah. What makes it scary?
Yeah.
Like, what is the thing that actually makes the scary, aside from the creepy face popping out in the window or whatever, you know? Yeah.
So I would say that's my pathway. And now I'm at a point where it is basically my entire personality.
I love it. It's also my entire personality. I wouldn't say that for me, it always was though, but I kind of have always been like into the spooky, the macabre shit. Like when I was 2, my mom put on like Snow White, right? The original Disney animated Snow White. And, you know, there's a part where like the creepy witch comes up and she's covering my eyes, and I'm like, looking around her hand, right? And I was 2. So I've always kind of been drawn to that, even in childhood. I was like, you know, I'd be up at the top of the stairs watching the creepy parts of Pirates of the Caribbean when my parents were watching it. And did you ever watch Little House on the Prairie?
I did, but
okay.
I don't know where we're going with this.
So you will. So it's like for those of you who don't know, it's an older show. It follows this family who are frontiers people.
Yeah.
So they're living on the prairie. They're just kind of trying to survive. Very covered wagon. Also based on a book. But there were 2 episodes that I watched over and over and over again, and one of them was the rabies episode. So there was an episode where like a raccoon got rabies and like bit their dog or something like that. And I watched that again and again. And then the other episode that I would watch on repeat was the plague episode. So
that's incredible.
Yeah,
those were incredible.
Those were my beginning time, right?
Yeah.
And then I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of scary movies until my parents got a divorce. And the first one that I think I watched was actually a movie called The Hitcher.
Okay.
It's from like 2007.
Yep.
Sean Bean, which I just like remembered because I looked it up and I was like, what was that movie? And I'm like, Sean Bean, what are you doing here? And so that was like kind of my first slasher, my first like real like rated R horror movie. And it was fine. It didn't scare me. But when I watched the first Paranormal Activity movie, that killed me. It scared me so bad, and I was like afraid of any kind of ghost anything for years after that. And then I got over it, right? And then I turned into the friend that when we would go to horror movies, my friend would be clinging onto me and being like screaming, and I'd just be cackling the whole time.
Yeah.
So it is a bit of an evolution, but the roots have always kind of been there.
Yeah. Can I interject about Paranormal Activity and my
Yes.
slight obsession with that movie?
Please do.
So a fun fact for the people at home that may or may not know this. So it was made for like something stupid like $10,000.
That's
like
wild.
Nothing. It was literally a dude, his girlfriend, and one of his buddies that he worked with at the time that was like, hey, do you want to make a horror movie?
That's fantastic.
And they figured it out found footage style, which I personally don't like found footage.
Okay.
It's hard for me to get into most of the time.
Okay.
There are the few that I'm okay with.
Yeah.
But like that one, when they pulled, I forget if it's the girlfriend or him that gets yanked out of the bed, forget about it.
Yeah, no, it's the footprints in the flower for me. That killed me. And then, so, and it's kind of similar story to the power going out. I was watching it in my bed with my best friend, my sister, and her boyfriend. We're all piled in bed and we're watching this. And I think half of them fell asleep. So I'm sitting there watching this by myself, and the TV, it was one of those little TVs that you could put a DVD into.
Oh,
yes. And I had it in my room, right? And so the TV cut out. And it was like fizzing, and I was like laying there frozen in bed, and I'm like, this is not happening. And then later my sister's boyfriend was like, yeah, she's still out there. And I'm like, that's not okay. She's gonna come in the window right now and kill me. So I think I must have been like maybe 13 at the time.
Oh,
so
that's a good age.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it definitely was like right at the cusp.
Have you watched the other ones?
I have. I actually later got kicked out of a theater because I was too young to get in and to see it because it was rated R. And then we saw Contagion instead, which is also a great movie.
Yes.
I love me a pandemic movie.
Yeah, and especially post-COVID, girl. Those hit different
those
now.
Hit different. Yeah, I remember watching Contagion like during COVID, like at the beginning of it, because I was like, here we are. This is real life. I'm just going to watch this and make my mental health so much worse. But
as we all were.
Yeah, but there's some kind of there's some comfort in it too, and being able to watch it and be like, hey, this is a little bit like real life.
Yeah.
Hopefully real life turns out a little bit differently in the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love horror. I think it's also a huge part of my personality, because people will ask me, what's your favorite genre of like books or movies, and I'm like, queer horror.
Yeah.
And those are my top read, top watched genres, and all of my my storycraft and everything. And sometimes I look at that and I'm like, I am a parody of myself, and it's totally fine.
Here we are.
Here we are,
living and breathing.
Yeah. I think now though, my relationship with horror is a little bit different. It's less like comfort. It's less watching it to be edgy, and it's more I look at it with kind of a critical lens. Like I look at it and I'm trying to figure out like, what is it doing? What is it saying? How is it playing into the genre, saying something about the genre, or breaking like the expectations of genre?
Yeah. It's like it's getting to a place where let's be a little bit deeper than being like, oh, that was stupid. Oh, that wasn't even scary.
Yeah.
Well, okay, can you actually formulate an idea and like actually communicate what you're trying to say right now?
Yeah.
Because to me, not scary, wasn't a good movie. You actually just aren't educated.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
You will learn about this podcast. We're going to have some hot takes that we're going to stand 10 toes down on, and that's going to be one of them.
Yep, absolutely.
As she looks directly into the camera for our 4 YouTube subscribers, probably.
4 is good. We'll take it. We'll take 4.
Yeah, like I just started watching In a Violent Nature. Like I texted.
You do.
Yeah,
you did.
So I got about halfway through.
Is it a series?
No, so it's a slasher.
Okay.
Okay. Slasher is my comfort genre. We're gonna get into that. I'm not gonna spiral yet. But like it was different. It's from his point of view, and like
Interesting.
You read reviews online and they're like, it's too much walking. He doesn't talk. Okay, well he's a slasher. You're missing the point.
That's what they do.
They have taken a subgenre. They said, you've loved Michael, you've loved Jason, you've loved Freddy, you have all these slashers that you love. We're going to give you a movie from their lived experience.
I love that.
And so far, I was obsessed with it.
Okay.
And there's some kills in there that are a really good time for me.
Okay.
And I was like, so yeah. So, but that's just an example. It's like you watch something and you're like, this is new. This is a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
This is why I enjoy it.
Yeah. And I think that we're in a good time for that right now. Because I think in like the 2010s and stuff, we were kind of like doing the same thing over and over. Granted, I do love like 2010s early aughts horror and for what it's doing.
Yes, yeah.
But I do like kind of the new stuff that we're doing, the deeper stuff, the more thoughtful things that we're doing with horror movies that like actually make them genuinely scary.
Yeah.
So you said slashers are like a comfort. Like what do you love about horror in general? Like we got it took you a while to get here, but now you're here.
Yeah. I think I had to really think about this question because I wanted to make sure I articulated it correctly. I think horror is so appealing to me and such a comfort for me because it is othered, much in the way of like the queer experience or the female experience. We are inherently othered because we are not a white man. So it's like horror, like we've ranted about this, we probably will again on this podcast, like how horror, you're really never going to win any award for a horror movie because people just are never going to look at that genre and be like, you deserve this as a horror actor or actress.
Yeah.
So I think I have so much comfort in it, like you were saying, like it fits the personality, like it's the lived experience a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think slashers in particular scratch a couple different itches for me, if you will. Like there's the slasher script, so to speak. Like they're 90 minutes in length. You know it's going to be a group of friends somewhere.
Yeah, doing something.
There are the certain friends you're going to peg immediately that you're going to be like, okay, he's going to be the first one to die.
Yes.
There's our final girl.
Yeah.
Like there are just certain archetypes within that genre where you know what to expect, which I think can be comforting.
Yeah, absolutely.
In just a world of chaos we live in.
Yeah.
And I think on a deeper level too, I think when I think about it, like I think as a queer woman, every time you go outside, you're like, is today gonna be?
Yeah.
And you're clocking every movement around you. And if I run trash after dark at work, the guy that stumbles out of the bar in front of me, my first thought is he going to follow me into the alleyway?
Yeah.
Where now you get a little bit of control of that violence, that lived violence, you know what I mean? Like, you get to sit on a couch and you just get to watch it on a screen, and you know that you are safe.
Yeah.
And again, there's a little bit of a predictability to it too. So you're like, well, here comes the kill.
Yeah.
Like, you know what's happening.
You know what's happening. You know where it's gonna go.
Yeah.
Final girl usually prevails. That's really interesting, of like finding the comfort in it. Because I think for me, I like what it says and like what it is reflect. I don't find a whole lot of I do find a lot of comfort in it, but not so well articulated as what you just said, actually. I don't know why. I just feel like I'll put on a horror movie, or I'll put on like some true crime. I'm a big true crime person too, particularly Dateline. I'll just have it on in the background, right? I'll be doing something else, but it's just the noise, right? And the noise is screaming and like gore noises and stuff, but it's still like, that's what I put on, right? But when I'm sitting and I'm watching and I'm like thinking about it, I think that what it says and what it's doing and kind of the things that the fear and stuff that it is working with, I just find really compelling in a way that I don't find in some other genres of stuff, but I don't really look for in other genres.
Well, here's where our microphone dies, because we're new here and we actually don't know what we're doing. So I catch it in about 10 minutes and we do a mic swap, so bear with us.
I like the things that are unexpected. So the formula of the things of like of the genre and in certain subgenres in horror.
Yeah.
Like, I find myself more drawn to things that break that.
Okay.
So I just think that contrast is really interesting.
Yeah.
That we both are big fans, but we're both getting something a little different out of it.
Yeah.
You know. Because I look at it as like an art form. I'm a big art person. I think art is the point of kind of being alive, and like we're using art to work through that lived experience and to reflect it and use it as a tool for reflection of how we're living, how society is functioning. And I think horror is one of the best art forms to do that in, because I think that, you know, shit's horrific. and I just find it I think it is one of the more honest forms of art.
I'm gonna push you down the rabbit hole here with a question.
Please do. Yeah.
So, to the point you just made about art being a reflection of the lived experience and kind of just navigating that, talk to me about the difference in the art of a horror novel, so the written word, compared to horror movies.
Horror movies, yeah. Okay, that's a good one. I think that's actually kind of a hard question, because I look for different things, I think, in books versus movies.
Okay.
Granted, that's both my most read and most watched genre. But I'm getting something different out of each of it. So I'm getting like, I guess like, in a lot of the horror books that I read, I look for also like some kind of tenderness too.
Okay.
Which is really interesting, because I think about this one author that I love, Gretchen Flecker Martin.
Okay.
Who wrote a book called Manhunt and a book called Cuckoo. These are both like very gross, very intense, kind of queer body horror stories. And what I really love about what she does with that genre is that she uses this, like, her books are full of body fluids and just like the grossness of bodies in both like a monstrous way and then also in a very human way, because she deals with both like monsters and humans in both of her writing. And I like the way that she is able to capture that kind of disgustingness of like being alive, having a body, and then also morph it into something like really beautiful and tender. Like, that contrast between these two things is really comforting to me, was someone who has like some weird body feelings, you know, a little bit of gender dysphoria and stuff like that, and like being able to find comfort in the grossness. Yeah. So yeah, I guess I do get comfort out of that. But in terms of what I'm looking for in horror movies, I guess I'm looking for a greater, it's less personal for me. So when I'm reading for something that feels really personal. When I'm watching something, I guess I'm looking for things that speak more to like the grander scheme of life. I guess something more existential, less personal. And more kind of commentary on like society and stuff. Like, for example, I love dystopia stories. I love zombie movies. And I love those in particular because of the terror of watching society fall apart and what it devolves into. So yeah, I guess for movies, it's more thinking about society, and for books, it's more thinking more about myself.
That's so interesting because I think, to your point about like striking that balance of like tenderness and horror, or like relatability, like feel like you very rarely. And I guess speaking mostly to my slasher subgenre obsession, like I feel like you very rarely like really dive in deep to a character to where you're like, oh, I'm really connected to them. It's usually just kind of like you fall into it and you're like, I fuck with her. Like, I really like her. I hope she makes it out. Where it's like, I could see how in a book you just get, you just get more pages to develop that.
Yeah, you get more stuff to work with. And I guess that's a big, that when I really like something, it's because I'm able to really kind of glom onto a character, right? And so that is kind of hard to find in some horror movies because a lot of them are built on archetypes. And so like I said, I love horror, but I am also a huge hater, and I find the more things that I'm like, this could have been done better, and this is why. Because I have a very high opinion on my creative brain, but haven't put anything out, right? But
that's fine. That's fine.
But yeah, no, I think that is a good point of like, it feels safer not getting so attached to maybe a character or something, because when I'm attached to a character, what happens to them devastates me.
That's understandable.
Or what other like horror things are we really kind of attached to?
I do love a good zombie movie. I think especially, I went down a real rabbit hole with The Walking Dead. It hit Netflix. I got my
Walking Dead hat.
It hit Netflix, and boy, did I binge. And I got to a point with The Walking Dead where I was like, I wouldn't mind just reverting back to, you are literally living to survive, and you are helping each other because we are all human. Like, I hit that point with that. I kind of went down that rabbit hole.
Kind of the enemy with, like, where we are in society now, right?
I love vampires.
I love vampires, too.
30 Days of Night is an all-time favorite for me. The vampires in that, just the whole setup, and even just like the appearance of a vampire in a movie, I'm like, that's it. If I could choose an element of horror to like live, like you have to be plunged into the genre and you are living this now, make me a vampire.
Oh yeah, okay. So fun story about that. I have with my two best friends, we call it the Vampire Pact.
Okay.
And it's pretty simple. It's like if one of us turns into a vampire, we're both telling them, we're not keeping it a secret, and then we're also turning everyone else too.
Yeah.
So we're not doing like, oh, I don't want to subject you to immortality. Oh, boo.
Yeah.
No, we're all in.
We're besties for eternity now. So I like that.
So if you want in on that Vampire Pact, let me know. If we ever turn into vampires. I too am a big vampire fan. I have my I like the pretty vampires, obviously. There's just something about the vampire that
the mystique.
It's the mystique. Yeah. It's the blood. It's kind of that mix of like horror and intimacy and like tenderness. And I think that really just kind of hits a spot. And they're a great monster. I think that because they are a monster. Yeah. They count as a monster. They are. And I'm a big fan of the monsters.
Well, and it's like I think several movies will portray them as they are these gorgeous human figures that appear, but then when the vampire hits, like, I really enjoy the movies that when they go into vampire mode, they get horrific.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's perfect.
Because it's in this whole idea of, like, their beauty and their, like, perfection.
Yeah.
It's just a disguise to hunt humans. And I think there's something particular about the idea of there being a greater predator, because, like, humans, whatever, at top of the food chain, destroying the world, you know, that's our whole thing, right? And it's, like, scary to think about that there's something bigger than us that's hunting us.
I think also, though, the kind of the mirror of, like, to me, I go into, like, living as a female and interacting with other women, and, like, that concept of, like, the alluring, pretty, normally they're kind at first, and then when you get close, it's actually a vampire, or it's actually a fucking bitch that is there to ruin your career, ruin your family. They're just shitting on you as a female because they don't understand how to empower another female. Like, that whole dichotomy, I think, can be thrown into there as well.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that.
And then to flip that on its head, I also like the concept of female vampires alluring men and then ripping their heads off.
Oh yeah, and that's just fun, just for the book recommendation that I have not read yet, but it is on the thing. Do you know of Carmilla?
I don't think so.
Okay, so, you know, we all know Dracula,
yes.
Obviously. Dracula's, like, supposedly the OG, but originally, the story that inspired Dracula was a book called Carmilla, and she is a sapphic vampire.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, she is.
Okay.
So that's on my TBR. I'm going to be reading it for this spooky season.
A recommendation for the people at home.
A recommendation for the people at home if you like Dracula, and if you like vampires, and if you like gay.
We've checked all the boxes, and we have a recommendation for you.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so we talked a lot about what we love. What are some things that we hate in horror?
So I threw this in.
You did throw this in.
I have some pet peeves in horror.
Okay.
That really pissed me off. One of which being the role of a woman's period.
Okay.
In her transformation into, she's now a werewolf because she got her period.
Okay.
She now has telekinesis because she is she is a pubescent young woman becoming a monster.
Right. Okay, I see where you're going with it. Yeah.
Fuck off is all I have to say.
Yeah.
It irritates me to my core. I think it is a disservice to women's health and just the discussion of periods and what women go through, and, like, demonizing it for no real reason. I have my period. I'm not a fucking werewolf. Yeah. Devastating. I would have loved to have gotten my period and became a werewolf. That would have been a blast for me.
That would have been super cool. Yeah.
To me, it's the equation of, like, the people that make Tampax commercials and everybody's happy. Nobody's happy on their period. But also, no one is morphing into a monster because of it.
Yeah.
And I think it just feeds into this when girls become a woman because they're flowering and they're getting their period.
Yeah.
Well, now they're monsters.
Yeah. It's that, like, demonization of just, like, women in general.
Like, when it comes up, like, I will be in a movie, and when that plot line hits,
that one drops,
it's a deep eye roll for me.
Yeah.
And I am now scrolling my phone because I just
like, no interest.
Yeah,
it's totally
like,
gone.
You lost me and you have pissed me off, and you have just shown me you don't know how to explain the female existence.
Okay. That makes me really curious about, and we can always save this for another episode, but, like, you've heard of a movie called Teeth?
Yes. I don't think I've seen it, though.
You haven't seen it? Okay, this is going to have to be one that we talk about later, because it is an interesting kind of Look, I remember I watched this movie. See, the whole concept is vagina dentata,
Yes.
right? Okay. I watched this movie with my guy friends
Oh God.
when I was a teenager.
That
And
sounds
we
like a
watched
disaster.
yeah, it was because like we were going into it like, oh, what is this? This is so,
Yeah.
right? And then I'm watching this movie and I'm like, wait, like this actually kind of rocks.
Yeah.
Like that would be amazing to have. If you could control it, that'd be amazing to
Yeah.
have, right? So I'd be really curious to get your opinion on that whole idea because there's it's interesting. I just looked it up. It is directed by a man,
Okay.
so it'll be interesting to kind of look through it and rewatch it with that in mind.
Yeah.
But no, I totally see what you're saying. It's like this demonization of like women, and then also like the whole idea of like, you know, once you get your period, you are a woman now. Where it's like, no, that's not how that works, like
Yeah.
culturally. So yeah, no, I can definitely see that being
Yeah.
a pet peeve.
That's my big one. I think one that I struggle with a little bit because the slashers are near and dear to my heart is like the torture porn of
Yeah.
horror. I think can gives us all that rep.
Yeah. Oh,
So
absolutely.
like the hostels of
The
the world.
hostels of the world. Yeah.
I get it. We're into a foreign country. We're being kidnapped. Some crazy stuff is happening, but I think they have their place, but I think those are the types of movies that lend to people being like, horror's disgusting. Why do you watch that shit?
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't bar anything. Where like when you look at the classics, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, they actually don't have a lot of gore. Like the OGs, like
Yeah.
Rob Zombie Halloween really ramped her up. We got a little blood again, but
Yeah.
like the foundation of this genre is not based on gore and blood.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't love those.
I don't, yeah, and I'm not a huge like any kind of like sexual violence as a shock factor. That's a
I spit
big,
on your grave.
yeah, I spit on your grave. Like, I mean, I was like, I just watched Terrifier 1 and Art the Clown, yeah.
For Art the Clown.
See it? And then so you get in this kind of like messy where I'm like watching this and I was like, oh my God, we're really doing this. And, you know, just the objectification of like women as being like, I think there's something to be said there, and maybe they are trying to say something. But I think that also, I mean, especially when you get into movies directed by like men, where it's like, well, are you really saying anything, or are you just defaulting to this thing? So it's not, I wouldn't say that that is a pet peeve. That's not something that's immediately going to make me annoyed by a movie, but it is going to make me question like the movie's motives of like one of our foundational questions that we'll be asking on this podcast is like, why are they doing what they're doing? And how is what they're doing making this thing scary?
Yeah.
Right. So I think that, I don't know, there's not a place, but like there is a use for it.
So I don't know if you've heard this, but I Spit on Your Grave, created by a man. For those of you who may or may not have viewed I Spit on Your Grave, there is a painfully long sexual assault scene that you see just about everything going on. And I have, obviously we get all of our information on TikTok and online nowadays.
Right.
And I have read some things and seen some videos where it claimed that the director of that created it that way because he and a friend had an experience of coming across a woman who had just been sexually assaulted and having to try to navigate trying to help her.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not connecting those dots for you.
Yeah.
Like, that's not, 1 and 1 is not making 2 for me in that scenario. I see your like, I'm hearing your justification.
Yeah.
I'm still not comprehending it.
Yeah.
And I'm also using this as a way to navigate to talking about a movie that I'm obsessed with that we will be covering. Run, Sweetheart, Run, which is an Amazon Prime original. It's the perfect example. It's created by a woman. and it is based around in the beginning of the movie there was a sexual assault, and I loved the way she shot it because the girl walks into the house, the man is behind her, and the man actually turns to the camera and puts his hand up, basically being like, stop. And then the door shuts, and all you hear is a commotion of some sort. And then she comes running out.
Yeah.
And hi, we're all adults. Put 2 and 2 together. Her clothes are ripped.
Yeah.
She's crying. She has a little bit of blood on her. We know what just happened inside. I didn't need to see it happen for 10 minutes.
Exactly. Because it gets into like that way of like, okay, are you showing this because it's horrifying?
Yeah.
Or are you showing this because it's titillating for some people?
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And like getting into that and like movies that make me question that, like, yeah, that's maybe something that I'm not going to totally get into, but I do like the premise of that a lot.
Yeah.
It is, I did start it. We're getting there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is, but it's, I think that's part of the horror genre of just like, of it being messy and like wondering what are we doing? Yeah. And that's part of the reason why we're starting this podcast, looking into that, being like, are we, what are we doing? How are we doing it?
Yeah.
Is it working?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Yeah. My horror pet peeves are a little less like controversial, but I think that my biggest one is the paranormal monster twist.
Okay.
Where it's like you have a killer, you have something, and it turns out that they're actually a ghost or a demon or a monster or something. And I think that there are certain films that do this in a way that makes sense, but I think more often than not, it feels cheap. If you're working with something that is like a killer turns out to be like some kind of monster creature, which is funny because I think I know why you're laughing.
I'm just laughing because I've been there.
Yeah.
You're like 2 hours into a movie
Yeah.
and you're like, what are we doing? Like, what is this? And then they do that and you're like, what?
It's like, why? Why does I think especially when it is a ghost for me, I don't know what it is about some ghost stories. I just get bored.
Do you have any specific movies that come to mind when you're like, the first time I watched that, I was ready to flip the TV?
Oh my gosh.
I
think, well, okay, this one is more in the ambiguity of it, but Open House. You've seen Open House? Oh my God. The worst movie I've ever seen. I hated it.
So don't add it to
Don't add it. No, unless you want to hate watch something. We can have a hate watch episode. I don't mind. But where it's just like, it doesn't need, oh, okay. This is one a little bit different, but still kind of in the same vein where in Orphan.
Okay.
Creepy little girl through the whole thing.
Yep.
The twist is that she's an adult woman. And I'm like, okay, it would have been so much creepier if it was just a little girl. If it's an adult woman, like, yeah, that's weird, like, what's going on there? But I think, like, the creep factor for me was that this is a child being a little freak.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. And I think that's really interesting. So, and then again, like, it's that pet peeve is a little wishy-washy because I think it can be done well.
Yeah.
But usually it's annoying to me. I'm like, commit to your bit, right?
With the Orphan, though, I'll send you down a rabbit hole. You know that's loosely based on a true story.
I did not know that. That's crazy. Okay.
So it's loosely based on a true story, to which they have released a documentary
now.
A
documentary?
About the woman that posed as a child.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, we're going to have to look into that.
But I guess also to sideline us, here's another, like, example of, I think sometimes the ability to Google or it pops up on your TikTok algorithm, like, almost works in a disadvantage sometimes to us.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I honestly think my older brother told me about it, of, like, it's loosely based on da-da-da-da. Yeah. So I kind of knew going in.
Okay.
To where, like, you had a completely different experience.
I did, because I saw that, like, around when it came out. Or maybe a couple years after.
Like, what is this?
What? Like, why? That being said, I do love Orphan First Kill because it is ridiculous, and I think it just takes this whole thing and just rips it apart by itself. And I'm like, that's great. You know what? Good for that, because they took a ridiculous concept and they made it more ridiculous.
Yes.
So I do like it when when a movie is gonna like embrace itself that way. They just like I said, like commit to your bit. You're setting something up this way, and then you're gonna turn it on its head, but not in a really fun way. Just in a way that undoes everything that you did. No, commit. Commit to the bit.
Right. So struggled with the curve, but if you're gonna curve and then you run down the new road you just created for yourself, you're okay with it.
Yes. Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah. I think another thing is flat characters are just hard for me sometimes. I think that's like coming from like books and just really loving books. Especially if it's a character that I'm supposed to really like, that like is the protagonist, and you're just like annoying, and just like why do I care? Why do I care what happens to you? And I think that plays into a lot of like final girl narratives for me, where I'm like, if your final girl is fucking irritating, I don't really want her to survive.
So that's like, I think that's part of what I love about the slasher genre, and what will get people spinning is like, you can get into a heated debate with people about who is like the ultimate final girl, or who is just absolute trash and needs to be rewritten and taken out of cinema forever.
Banished.
Banished. You're gone. We don't need you anymore. But I will say, I think to the movie versus book dichotomy, we're always the line we're going to be treading. Like, I think, again, in a book, people are so methodical about character development, and here is their storyline, and here is their plot, or whatever. And I am adamant that in a movie, characters are created to just be killed.
Yeah, okay.
Like, I will clock that friend immediately, where I am like, he's a douchebag. He's usually a football player. Like, the slutty girl. Like, they're always. You are dying. You serve no purpose.
Yes. Gone. Done. I think it goes back to there has to be a kill in the first 5 minutes. Otherwise, I'm fucking out.
Yes. I do carry a little bit of that. But then I think even too, like, those characters, though, I just watched, again, we've discussed via text, because I text her everything about, we've got a Boo Crew chat. Shout out Santi.
Hi, Santi.
And Blink Twice. So you go in and there are two friends.
Okay.
So you're like, oh, these are my two final girls. Well, one gets killed. Spoiler alert. Sorry. We will do spoilers in this.
Yes.
And then another girl in the group, like, all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, so like, what are we trying to do here? Like, yeah, I agree with such and such. I don't want to go too far into it, because you need to freaking watch it. You absolutely need to watch it. And I will probably try to peer pressure you into making a episode on it later. But
I'm already down. I'll put it on the list.
But, and I, like, it's a plot twist of, I love when you're like, these are my two final girls. Well, one gets killed. She's got to be solo. And then when they bring a girl that was kind of in the background, and then all of a sudden she's like, hey, we need to talk.
Yeah.
And then they're like besties.
Yeah.
And then it's them going at it. And I'm like,
that's a good, I dig that too. And I'm a sucker for a good background character, because I don't know why. It's like, maybe like the little anime weirdo in me, I always fell in love with the side characters, right? So, I love the background character coming into the foreground. That's always fun. Yeah. Definitely on the list. I'm going to go home tonight after we record and watch a bunch of horror movies for the rest of the night.
Yeah. You know, I think that's also partly why we're shooting bi-weekly.
Yes.
Because as we're
us time.
We're tails spinning, and we're talking about all these movies we want to cover, we want to make sure we give ourselves time to cover some.
Yes, to cover, to think about it, to take notes, maybe do a rewatch or two. Well, how are we feeling? What do we got? I'm feeling great. I think this has been great.
This was the horror rant.
The rant
I wanted. This is exactly what I expected out of us.
Excellent.
This is what we had been doing in social settings for months now, and I was like, there has got to be
an
audience of people that want to partake in this and hopefully listen.
Yeah.
I will just do a little blurb. I probably should have done a little backstory when we were doing our intro. I made a horror TikTok.
You made a horror TikTok.
Yeah, and I had been on TikTok. I don't know, maybe a year or 2 years now.
Okay,
That I've been
yeah.
trying to do this horror account. And I quickly realized TikTok is a little bit of a cesspool.
Yeah,
Like,
sure is.
I created it because I was like, oh my gosh, like I just want to connect with other people, and I want to find other people and have great discussions. And TikTok is not the place for discussions or anything you are committing more than 2 brain cells to.
Yeah.
So this is also why I have roped Cale into doing a podcast, YouTube content.
Yeah.
Is because I am adamant that audience is out there.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We want to interact with them, and we want to hear from you guys, and you'll see we're covering a lot of queer and a lot of female creators, we'll say. So if you have input, leave us comments, chat, because
suggestions.
I want to make like a little spooky online crew.
Yeah,
we have
a crew.
We have our little spooky bitches at work, and they give me so much.
They do too, and we keep adding more.
Yeah, big gay joy, and we always talk about horror movies at work, and it's a safe space.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the biggest thing is like I know that there are people out there living a certain existence that could be struggling and maybe don't feel like they have their people. And we want to be your people.
Yeah, we do.
We have good people, and we want to be
extend the love. And that's one thing that I really like about just like the spooky gays. I think there's something so interesting in the way that like queer people glom onto this genre, because it is like you were talking before about the othering and the it's isolating out there, but there are you know, there are people out there for you. You know, there is a community out there, and I think helping people find it is a really good mission. That and ranting about things is also fun.
Yeah, look, long-term goals is we just want to be 2 talking heads that talk to people about horror, and this is what we get paid for. Is like the dream.
That is the dream.
But for now, we're just in my basement
having a good time.
Having a good time.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we close out, Lisa, what are you obsessed with right
now? I've pivoted from. Okay, I'm gonna back up. You're making me short circuit. I'm so excited to talk about this. So we're gonna. I did that really bad the other day at work. I was trying to talk to 2 people at the bar, and I like just stuttered to the point where I was like, "Excuse me, let me start again." I just stroked out. The end of every episode, we're gonna start with like a obsession of the week. What is the current obsession?
That is.
I have been down a rabbit hole with Criminal Minds.
So I'm like 10
seasons in, and I'm starting to drag now.
Yeah.
We've watched hundreds of hours of just serial killers. I'm like, I need something different. And obviously, I'm a Shudder girly. I'm an AMC Plus girly. I was like, I'm going to give Interview with a Vampire a go, because shout out to my TikTok algorithm. It became all about queer vampires and Lestat.
Lestat.
And I was like, fine, I'll try it. I'm already through season 1. And I am all consumed.
Oh yeah.
It like we were talking about boxes to check earlier. We've got vampires. We have got very queer. We have got just the allure of this really abusive relationship.
The toxicity.
Which like feels so familiar to the queer experience, like, and especially early on. And then it's like also that thought of like, if you're early on in life and you're queer and you're living in the closet, and then you get turned into a vampire who is also queer, because I will always say vampires are inherently queer, always.
Inherently.
Or at least bisexual. They're in the family.
Yes. Okay. Just a quick aside. I was talking to my friend about this, about how could you be immortal, right? Living thousands of years, sleeping with hundreds of different people, and still be straight. Isn't that boring?
Yes.
Isn't that so boring? Like, it doesn't make sense.
That's actually a very valid, rationalization as to why have I never thought, to me, I'm just like, they're queer, but it's like, obviously, actually, if you're gonna live for hundreds of thousands of years, I would hope you're gonna dabble in a little bit of everything.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same with like aliens and stuff. Like, there's gotta be just a little bit.
Yeah.
But I totally cut you off. But
no, that's okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So my current obsession is Interview with the Vampire.
Yeah.
Because season 3 is coming, so it's like this scramble of like, season 3 is going to drop. Mm-hmm. Well, I can get through the first 2 seasons before then. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm in the same boat, actually. The only thing that is preventing me from like fully being consumed by Interview with a Vampire is that I keep playing Cult of the Lamb. Yeah. So hours dropped into that I could be spent watching Interview with Vampire. But no, I love it. I love how messy they are. I love how there's just something about like the morally gray characters, like give me the villain, give me the mess. Like, not everything that is like a queer depiction has to be perfect and loving and fruity and all of that. Like, no, give me the blood, give me the mess.
Like, I just the end of season 1 when they do the massacre of people.
Oh my God.
And there is a line, and part of what he says is he's like, they do their last dance together. So the 2 male vampires like dance at this ball and then proceed to kill people. And he was like, they wrote about all the horrors, but they would leave this part out. Like something along those lines, is if to touch on like, they would go so deep as to describe us ripping people limb from limb, but they would not write about us being in a same-sex relationship and having a beautiful moment before the chaos started.
Yeah.
It's just those little nuggets in horror where I'm like, that is so true.
Yeah, see, and it's like back to like the tenderness and the horror. It's just, I love that combination. It kills me.
Yeah. Tell people, so I guess we might end up dabbling a little bit in games on this podcast as well. Tell people about the Cult of the Lamb, because I too have done, so I did my Cult of the Lamb dive, I don't even know, maybe a year ago, but I was in that obsessive of, I have to play it every night. And tell the people the premise of the Cult.
Okay, so it is, you start the game and you're a cute little lamb that's being sacrificed to this old god, right? And then you are resurrected, and this old god is like, go in my glory and like and use this red crown, go in my glory, start a cult in my honor, right? And then you go through and you play the mission, but really it is, I keep describing it as, also someone who has never played Animal Crossing, but Animal Crossing for freaks.
Yes.
And it's great. You cultivate this little cult. You get to name your little cult members. You get to you farm and all this stuff, and then you go on your crusades and you murder a bunch of enemies. And you come back with new followers, and you're fighting gods, and it's great. You do perform these little rituals where you can sacrifice them or make them eat each other or make them run around naked. It's so great. So it is, really is. It is like your classic farming game for like freaks like us. It's awesome.
It's like, to me, it's the perfect balance between, if you like a cozy game where you're planting your crops, you're watering your crops, you got to make sure that you feed your cult members, because if you're gone on your crusade for too long, people are dying back home because they're not getting fed.
Yeah. They're so needy.
They are.
It's so frustrating.
I would always, so when you're on your crusade, you have the clock.
Yes.
And I would always watch the clock and be like, oh, gotta get out of this crusade. So it's this perfect balance of like cozy game, but then you get to go on your crusades and like attempt to kill creatures and things.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
it's
it is
the best.
It is
and it is
addicting.
It is addicting. I think it's purposely constructed to be addicting because you keep going. You're like, okay, I just got to do this and this, and I'll come back and do this, and then you're like, well, now I have to go and do this.
Yeah.
So I poured hours into it. I poured like 12 hours straight into it one day, and I was like, well, there goes my entire day, but I'm happy because my cults are happy.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's my obsession of the week so far.
All right, so the obsessions and the recommendations for this week are watch Interview with the Vampire
Please.
before season 3 comes out.
I need someone to talk about it with.
If you are a gamer girly, check out Cult of the Lamb.
Yeah, awesome.
All right, well, that's a wrap on
episode 1.
We've been manifesting this for a while. We're happy to be here.
We did it.
This episode will drop on a Monday. We're going to drop on Mondays.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do, like I said, we're going to do bi-weekly. We don't want to get too deep into
the
swimming pool and just drown and fizzle out.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to burn out. This is something I want to be sustainable.
Yeah.
I think we got something here.
And then after a long discussion, we did decide episode 2, we will be diving into Jennifer's body.
Yes.
Because what else could this podcast lead in with than Jennifer's body? So you have a couple weeks to watch it to make sure that you're up to speed with us, and then we're gonna dive in and talk all about how amazing it is.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Lisa. Yeah. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Bye, guys.